Hey, Tom.
Hey, Sandy.
How are you?
Still doing great, thank you.
Oh, good. So, my question today is, there is many changes coming up with the commission, the cost of representation for both the buying agent and the seller's agent.
Mm-hmm.
How is that going to affect the VA and even FHA?
Well, I know where you're going with this. There's been a lot of questions about this because in the past, the way things have operated is that the seller would make an arrangement with their agent as to what they would compensate their agent for selling the property, and that agent then would share a portion of that compensation with whoever brought the buyer to the property. It was a cooperative agreement. Due to lots of various changes in the industry, that is changing, and now the buyer and seller's representation costs are going to be handled separately. And the question came up is, if a seller wants to pay for the buyer's representation to stay competitive in this market for selling their home, how does that affect the loan? And on the lending side, we were kind of in flux for a while because all the loan programs have certain limits on how much a seller can offer towards concessions on a loan program.
Oh, right.
And we got the rulings from the powers that be at Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, that if a seller pays for the buyer's representation, that is not considered part of their standard maximum concessions allowed. So in other words, if this program allows for 3% seller concessions and the buyer asks for and the seller agrees to pay for their compensation for their agent, that could be 1, 2, 3%, and they still can contribute towards the closing costs on top of that. So that was a huge win, I think, for the buyer to make sure that they had that opportunity, and probably for the seller too, to be competitive. VA was interesting because the VA's had a long-standing rule that the buyer could not pay for the representation. It was prohibited on a VA loan, and they've come out with a temporary order saying that it is allowable. So if you're interested in a property and the seller is not paying for representation, the VA buyer can do so. Of course, all that's going to be negotiated with you and discussed prior to even going out to look at homes.
Sure.
But there are definitely some accommodations in the lending world to make sure as these changes are happening, we have as little impact on the buyer as possible. Certainly there is some, but that's why they need to sit with you and really understand what their options are from a buyer's perspective and a representation perspective. And then once that conversation is done, they can talk with their lender and find out how it affects their loan process.
Thank you so much. You're always a wealth of information. And for those of you out there, Tom Heath, Nova Home Loans, great lender. Sandy Bullaway here, Tierra Antigua Realty.
Thank you.